Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. How are you all doing out there? Here in the UK, I think we're expecting to be locked down until Easter kind of time. And with no hairdressers open since early December, this means I've got a difficult decision to make. Embrace a dodgy home haircut or just shave it all off like Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now. I'm curious, how are you all dealing with this first world problem? Luckily for me, I've got a great face for radio and I can hide behind a microphone. But enough of my hair grooming advice and tales. This is a tech show. And after recently reading that Railsbank, a banking as a service platform, raised $37 million in a growth funding round, I felt compelled to invite them onto the podcast to find out more. And the API-based platform enables developers and product managers to build, launch and scale a financial services business. And it also provides financial services operations and regulations for customers. So today, I want to learn a little bit more about their technology and the concept of banking as a service and its next frontier, credit as a service. But I also want to explore the traditional world and the difficulties of building credit cards for fintechs, because it's something that I was blissfully unaware of until today's conversation. But then looking to the future, I also want to talk about new use cases for credit card as a service and what kind of value that can unlock. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Los Angeles so we can speak with Dov Marmor from Railsbank, who's going to talk about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Dov. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Pleasure to be here. My name is Dov Marmor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for North America at Railsbank. A little bit about the company to give you context. Railsbank has been around for 4 years. We have 215 tech companies basically that have built financial products on top of our platform, and we have over 3 million end users. We're funded by major institutions like Visa, Anthos, Ventura Capital, and a bunch of others. We just raised $37 million in our last round. You may have read that we recently completed our acquisition of Wirecard's UK business. We've also just launched our platform into Singapore and the United States. And I'm responsible for our US business, as well as building our credit card as a service product. Before this, I used to lead banking as a service for Green Dot, which was one of the top BaaS platforms in the US. We built the programs for Uber, Intuit, Apple, Stash, Wealthfront, and a bunch of others. And before that, I led the US launch of Currency Cloud, which is Nigel, our CEO's prior startup. That was one of the early platforms to build cross-border payments as a service and powered companies like TransferWise and Stripe in the early days.
And fintech is such a big buzzword at the moment. And one of the things that attracted me to Railsbank is your mission to enable any business or brand to rapidly become a fintech. But just for anyone tuning in and hearing about you guys for the first time, can you expand on that and how you do it too?
Sure. So in the past, most financial services have been created by banks. And that's because there is a very high regulatory and infrastructure overhead to build a financial product. And that's why banks have kind of held the chokehold on that market for quite a long time. Essentially, banking as a service, credit card as a service, all these iterations have companies like Railsbank. We build out the entire infrastructure, including the regulatory framework, the APIs, the operations team, the backend integrations to all the different networks that you need to run a card program. We do this incredibly complex and expensive project once, and then we create a series of APIs that allow external companies to plug into that infrastructure and build new products on top of it. So we allow any tech company to create their own credit card, debit card, banking app, payment product, fully embedded into their own experience and designed in a way that meets the needs of their end customers. So kind of the history of this, it started with payments as a service, where companies like Stripe and Braintree created the embedded payments experience. that we all experience in Uber or Grubhub or any of the apps where a payment just kind of happens. That was how payments were reimagined to support a user experience by tech companies in phase one. Phase two was banking as a service. So you had companies like Acorns and Stash and Wealthfront and Chime all create their own versions of a neobank. And they did that by plugging into banking as a service platforms who kind of took care of the first 80%. And now we're about to enter the next generation, which is credit cards, that essentially allows any company to build their own credit card or their own lending product on top of a series of APIs that are managed by companies like ours.
And one of the other things that stood out for me was when I was researching you guys is the difficulties of building credit cards for fintech. It's probably something I never would have dreamed of thinking about or been aware of. And so for anyone listening, can you expand on those difficulties that again, for a lot of people listening, they're probably completely unaware of?
Sure. So, what was great about Railsbank is our existing platform took us 80% of the way there, right? So a credit card has three components. It's an account and a ledger that can increase and decrease value based on a customer's spend. It's a card. So all the different Lego blocks or tools that you need to manage a card experience and app. And then it adds a third component on top of that, which is credit. So the ability to tie a line of credit to a card. So instead of only being able to spend down a positive balance like you have in debit, you can actually spend negative on your balance because you have a credit line to draw against. And in order to do that, it takes on, the tech is actually the easy part. All the complexity is really around risk management and setting up the capital and knowing the right regulations that apply to credit and to lending and to consumer protection. So building that entire infrastructure is what we call a rail that powers credit cards in the United States. So that's the really big piece of infrastructure that we build, and then we offer it to companies as a service. I give a good analogy. In the food industry, you have this concept of a co-packer. And a co-packer essentially has a large industrial kitchen and experts in food safety and regulation. And essentially, if you are a chef and you develop a new recipe for cookies, you go to a co-packer and they create the cookies to your specifications and they package it the way that you want it and they send it to the distributors that you've lined up and they sell it to the customers that you've sold it to. But a chef does not have the right skill set to go build his own cookie factory, typically out of the gate. It's not a wise investment early on in your journey. That same idea of co-packers didn't exist in financial services. It was a large gap in the market of you need a company to invest in that infrastructure so that product and tech companies can build new experiences. So that's what we set out to build.
Also, when I've been reading about you guys, I also come across banking as a service and also its next frontier, credit as a service. And for people outside the banking industry, could I ask that you expand on those a little bit too?
If you distill it down, your core financial products are banking. So giving someone an account where they can hold and protect their assets. Payments, so the ability to move those assets from account to account and pay for things with them. Move them cross-border, move them into alternative asset classes. So that kind of all sits in that payments realm. And then credit is the ability to borrow additional assets beyond what you have. And each one of those requires a different set of tools in order to build those products. And you end up with something really special if you can support all three and combine those different kind of components to create financial products. So a term loan would be an account and a credit line. You basically have the credit line disperse funds into an account. A credit card is an account, a credit line, and a card mechanism because you access the credit line through the card instead of having it deposited into an account. So we think of financial services as little building blocks. And if you break them down into their core functions, you can put together building blocks into new and unique ways that power experiences like you see in the tech universe with all the embedded financial services that come out on a weekly basis.
So if we was to take credit card as a service, for example, what kind of new use cases do you think that could unlock?
So today's credit card, you pay your bill, you get some points. They kind of sit in this extra account. 90% of us don't ever use them and they seem to lose value every year. When you think about an embedded credit card experience, there's multiple different company types that could use it. So let's start with investment apps. So you kind of have all these neobanking apps that allow you to invest in a variety of ETFs at zero fees. Now imagine you created a credit card offered by those same investment apps, and instead of their cashback going into points that connect to travel, that cashback could go directly into an investment account and start to accumulate additional wealth. Imagine if instead of just relying on your cashback, every time you swiped a card and spent $10, the app could push you a notification asking if you'd like to match the 10 you just spent with 10 invested in your portfolio. So that's kind of an interesting investment use case. Take it over to an underbanked use case. Imagine you can't get a credit card today. You could build a secured credit card, which essentially allows a user to deposit funds into an account and spend money against those funds while we report to a credit agency, and allows them to build their credit over time and graduate into a traditional credit card. Another example would be airlines. Instead of your airline co-brand credit card where you're just accumulating points for that specific airline, imagine that same credit card experience could live in the airline app. And every time you swipe, you could have your points go to a specific flight that you've already chosen. And as soon as you spend $2,000 on your credit card on whatever it is you want, you've now paid off 25% of the flight to Australia that you've always been dreaming about. So it's all about brands bringing new capabilities and new delightful services to their customer base through the lens of finance, but it doesn't look anything like a traditional credit card. That's what we're aiming for.
And I also read about your belief around why building on a platform is actually a faster way to test ideas and get market feedback. But can you expand on that? After reading that, it reminded me a lot of Steve Jobs and Apple back in the day. But can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So if you go to any company, there's kind of two different skill sets that are needed, right? There's the ability to build infrastructure and operate it. And then there's the ability to create products and to market those products and to create fantastic user experiences. And early on in your product journey, you're going to have a limited pool of resources, and you kind of have to decide what area of the ecosystem you want to concentrate on. So for most tech companies, their core skill set is products, product marketing, acquiring users, and creating delightful user experiences. Their core skill set is not going to be capital markets and risk management and KYC and payment networks and things like that. So imagine you're a major tech brand and you want to build a credit card. You really only want to take items 5 through 10, and you want to outsource items 1 through 4 to somebody else who's already gone through the pain of building out that infrastructure and operates it for many others. So this is going back to that co-packer concept. You can get new products into market in months instead of years, because somebody else has already built all the hard stuff, and you can just kind of focus on creating the user experience that wraps around that.
I'm curious, what do you think are the key rules to empower a business to scale on a platform such as this?
So one is know your customers. The companies that are most successful in building products, they have a deep understanding of their customers. They understand how finance would embed into their platform and their experience to enrich what customers already come to them for. And they spend a lot of time differentiating their product from other products on the market so that it's sticky and exciting and people talk about it with others. They're also, the best companies know what they're not good at, right? So they decide which parts of the value chain do they want to own and which part of the value chains do they want to outsource. They're very clear and concise about how that's going to work. And they're strong at picking the right partners that kind of share their vision and help them bring that to market.
So in your experience, if anybody's listening, any decision makers out there, what's the best way of building a unique value proposition using a standardized set of tools?
So on a credit card, let's dive into a specific example. First question is, what would your users do with a credit card if you built it the way that you wanted to? Right. So I go back to the investment use case because it's one that I love. Right. If you could actually have your cash back go into a income generating asset instead of going into points, which are who knows what they're actually worth. I think that is an amazing product because people who really want to build their wealth will highly resonate with having their cash back go into something that's building their overall net asset value. And how do they do that? These apps can actually show the growth in your wealth as you continue to deposit more and more cash back into the investment account. I think another one is if somebody builds a financial product like a credit card, customers come in and they check their balances and they check their transactions on a daily basis. How can you gamify that experience and bring delightful moments to people coming back into your brand? So that was a good one of the airline example I talked about. Imagine every time you spend, instead of just getting a point that you don't really care about, imagine you're 1% closer to the flight you want to take. So for companies that are really trying to build financial products for the first time, it's just about understand the user experience that you want to deliver customers, understand how financial services will enhance why customers already come to you today, and make sure that those two components are deeply intertwined in the product that you build. So don't build a standalone credit card. Make sure that it kind of connects with all the other aspects that people come to you for in your ecosystem.
Fantastic. And as we begin to look towards the future, there's a lot of optimism in the industry at the moment. I've got to ask, what excites you about the road ahead for fintech and the role that Railsbank will play in that future too?
To me, it's all about empowering the innovators to change new markets. So, part of the reason every time you've seen a major bank launch a new fintech product, it typically has not been very exciting, is because the people designing it are people within a bank, and they don't really think the way that an Apple or an Amazon or an Etsy or one of these new companies is thinking about delighting users. Product companies and banks just think fundamentally differently. And when you bring that product mindset into financial services, you end up with incredible new user experiences that people hadn't imagined previously, right? Things like Robinhood, things like Stash, things like Chime, things like the checkout experience when you get out of an Uber, things like the ability to source products from all around the world through a platform like Etsy or Shopify. So when you start to empower companies like that who have this global game-changing vision about completely changing the experience around things, and you empower them to do it by giving them all the tools they need without having to go out and become a bank themselves, you just end up with a massive new set of products that are so much better for consumers and so much more exciting. And to me, powering those brands and getting to work on so many unique and different projects and hearing the perspectives of so many smart people, I have no idea what a company is going to design when we first decide to work with them. And the things that come out through the multiple iterations and collaboration that comes out the back end are really, really game-changing, in my opinion.
I would imagine that your words are going to inspire a few people listening today. So for those people, can I ask that you point them in the right direction of where to find Railsbank online and also the best way of contacting your team?
Sure. So definitely follow us on LinkedIn. You can go to our website at www.railsbank.com. And I would absolutely invite you to follow me personally. I'm a LinkedIn junkie, constantly posting content about our company, industry trends, thought leadership, doing co-collaborations with other folks in the industry. So if you're really interested in building a fintech product for your own company or just learning about the industry in general and want to keep tabs on what Railsbank's up to, those are the best ways to go ahead and do it.
Excellent. Well, like I said at the very beginning of the podcast, fintech is such a hot topic at the moment. But what I've loved about our conversation today is just digging that little bit deeper, learning about the key rules to empower a business to scale on a platform and how to build that unique value proposition using a standardized set of tools. Pure gold from my point of view, and I'm sure it will be for a lot of people listening. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and share that with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
I've got to be completely honest with you. I had no ideas about the difficulties and complexities of building credit cards for fintechs. So I loved hearing about these problems and how Railsbank is enabling businesses or brands to rapidly become their own fintech. And also a big thank you to Dov for his patience and explaining why building on a platform is a faster way to test ideas and to get market feedback, but also the key rules to empower a business to scale on a platform and how to build a unique value proposition using standardized sets of tools, all in a language that everyone can understand. But for everyone listening, as always, I would like to throw the microphone back to you and say, please share your experiences and insights by popping me a quick email, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Clubhouse, a long list of social channels. Just look for me at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find 1,500 podcast interviews across Tech Talks Daily, Switched On Thinking with Netgear, and Tech Fusion by Citrix. That's more than enough to keep you busy until I next appear in your podcast feeds, which will be tomorrow morning. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.